Now offer you the presenters. I wanted to see if Karen was on first. Karen Funkenbush? Well, I'll go ahead and start. So Karen Funkenbush is one of the presenters, and she is an extension specialist at the University of Missouri Extension. Karen has worked with the AgrAbility project in Missouri for over 20 years. Primary responsibilities include serving as the director and PI for Missouri AgrAbility's project, Beginning Farmers and Ranchers Development Project, and the Midwest Region Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network Program. She also teaches farm safety and health courses for the Agricultural Systems Management Program at University of Missouri College of Agriculture, Food and Natural Resources. David Middleton grew up on a diversified grain and livestock farm near Laonia, Missouri, and graduated from the University of Missouri with a degree in animal science. David's involvement in agriculture has been from the very beginning of his life. The project that started in FFA grew into internationally recognized swine herds of Yorkshire and Landrace that won many national and state shows. In 1986, David developed a registered Angus beef herd, and today Embryo Transferred is involved to develop superior breeding stock. David joined Lincoln University in 2014 as the farm outreach worker for Lawrence and Greene counties. His passion is to share his knowledge and see successful farms continue into the next generation. Susan Jaster is a farm outreach worker for Lincoln University's innovative small farm outreach program. In the West Central region of Missouri, she provides research-based agricultural information to small, non-traditional, women-centric, specialty, and underserved farmers and ranchers. She assists producers with adaptive grazing, high tunnels, small ruminants, poultry, soil health, and regenerative agriculture practices. Susan is a sheep rancher and assists in the Missouri AgrAbility program. Kendra Graham has been a field specialist in livestock with the University of Missouri Extension for 20 years and headquartered in the East Central and Southeast portions of Missouri. She has focused much of her career on educating youth in agriculture, beef heifer development through the Show Me Select Heifer program, management of intensive grazing through the Missouri Grazing Schools, and small ruminant production education. During non-work hours, Kendra runs a beef cow-calf operation with her family. So now we'll turn it over to the presenters to begin.
Hello, I'm Susan Jaster, and we're going to call this presentation Buckers, Cluckers, Duckers, and Schmuckers, or Don't Get in a Jam with Cows, Goats, Sheep, Pigs, and Poultry. Here's one of those buckers. Keep going, Sean. Cluckers, and some of the duckers. If you ever tried to rope a pig, a sheep, or a goat, they're always ducking their head. Thank you for listening today. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this session. And you can see on your screen there that we have some granted information that we need to cover, talk about the Missouri AgrAbility project. And we're serving under that project number. And this is a joint effort today from Lincoln University of Missouri, and as well as MU, University of Missouri. Next. And here's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about prevention, avoidance of injury and secondary injury for humans and for livestock. And also we'll move into building a standard operating procedure and how planning ahead can prevent injury and other problems. And if you train your workers and your livestock, you're going to have a lot less stress on days when we have to work a lot of livestock. And it helps if everybody knows what's the next procedure. This is also going to save some labor and time and your input costs. If you're prepared ahead of time, you don't have too many surprises, and you know what your costs are going to be, and you know how many animals you'll need to work on those work days. And if we have excellent records, then that gives us proof of what we've done. If you don't write it down, it didn't happen, and you can't prove it to anybody. This also gives you an inventory list for what's going to happen next on your farm or ranch, and that way you can budget for it. So when we talk about animal behavior, we have to know a little bit about how animals work and think. This picture represents the circle of flight for any animal who knows it's a prey animal. That would be sheep, goats, cattle, hogs, poultry, anything that knows it can be preyed upon by a predator. They have a mindset of certain ways that they do things. And so we want to think about that as we are working with our domesticated animals, because these things still are true for them as well. They have a circle of flight, which means there is a certain amount of pressure. If it's applied to the animal, then they will run away, or if they feel cornered, they could stay there and fight. So we don't want to have either one of those behaviors. We're always wanting to try and work with the animal and know where their pressure points are, where the balance point is, and how we can get them to do what we need them to do so that everybody has less stress. That animal behavior is using low stress handling, which is what we've been talking about. No noise to little bit of noise, like with flags, and train your animals to use the equipment that you're going to process them through. So if you have a bud box and a alleyway that leads up to your chute, then that's kind of set up to help the animals function in the way that they normally would. They like to go around things, and so they can see what's happening, and then they can kind of explore a little bit, and then they walk right in quite often to the bud box, which is just a way of setting up your pen. There's lots of different kinds of pens out there that you can use. But when you train your animals to use the equipment that they're going to be handled through, there's a lot less stress, and you are being a professional stockman by using these stockmanship techniques. So you notice on the picture there, we talk about the blind spot and the balance point, and then the human is standing at point A or point B, whatever you're trying to get the animal to do. So if we train our animals to go through the equipment, that's a lot less stress for us. Plus, they're not surprised at what they need to do. And a lot of times you can do this by feeding them in the facility that you're going to work them through, and then letting them quietly walk out through the chute, leaving it open at the widest opening. And so that's what you're trying to make them feel more comfortable. And then it's not as hard to work them on the day of the event. And here you're going to talk about, I'm talking about the fight or flight zone. And it's really important to know, if you're trying to make an animal move forward, you're going to stand at point A on this, as you can see on this slide. And then if you're trying to turn the animal, you're going to come more at point B, because remember, ruminants have a very wide vision field, and we want them to not be afraid of us, but to do what we need them to do. So if we don't want them to run away, we're not going to use a lot of pressure to get them to move forward or to turn. We're just going to step in toward them and get them to turn or go forward. So as long as you're using the pressure correctly and your balance points correctly, animals will do what you need them to do. If there's other animals involved and not just one, they'll have more of a herd reaction to what you're asking them to do. And that all terrible blind spot in the back of a cow or a goat, you don't want to stand there because that foot can come right up. I had early on in my career trying to push animals out and getting in a hurry, and you get a lot of bruises on your legs doing that because they're going to kick you. And now let's move on into more of the management and the equipment use that we have. This is a tip chute for sheep or goats, and it is basically a squeeze chute. And as the animal walks in, they have a narrow base for their feet, which keeps them moving forward. And then as you get them into the right position, you push the bar and squeeze down on the animal, which prevents them from moving a whole lot and keeps them from jumping. And then you can see where the bars are coming over at a right angle over the top of the chute. That keeps them from jumping, but that's also the way to tip the chute. So you can pick it up and roll the animal to their side. And then the floor drops out with the flick of the rope there. And you can see this is a pretty old, well-used chute, and there's just a heavy bale twine, as many producers will always have bale twine around. But that is the trigger for pulling the levers to drop the floor out of the chute, so that you can work on feet or check anything underneath the animal, because now you have a room to work. So when you're using these kinds of chutes, you always want to check on, Sean, can you go back one? Sorry, I got ahead of myself there. And the reason why this slide is in here is because if on the day before work day, if you'll go through and check pulleys, zerks, ropes, handles, gates, all the attachments to everything, and your alleyways, then you know that you're going to have a good work day that way, because you have done some maintenance to make sure this unit is going to work. And you're also going to check your fences around your bud box. And as you can see, there's sheep in the background there, but the bud box is on the inside of the fence. So the animals would go past this chute and go into the bud box where we would capture them and then run them through the chute. And a nice little thing to remember about your alleyway is that your alley should be 2.5 times the length of your animals. So as an individual cow, sheep, or goat would walk through there, you want your alleyway to be at least 2.5 times longer than that adult animal. So that helps you keep them walking forward. And that's what you're trying to do when you set up a good structure like this, so that it works for you and you're not always having to back up and push animals in. All right, now let's advance it, Sean. All right, so now we've talked about a chute, and this is a cattle chute, of course. But what's wrong with this picture? If we're trying to prevent injuries, and possibly we have a worker who is in a wheelchair, what problems do you see that could happen the way this is set up? So first of all, to me, there's no shade for anybody, not the animals, not the workers. Sometimes you just need something over the top, so on hot days, everybody can survive all the work. So we need some shade over this chute. There's no permanent supply table. Sometimes that is not as easily done, but a lot of people have a workspace so that you can keep coolers, keep medicine cold, and have your supplies out, any syringes you need, any other kind of vaccinating equipment and things like that. The other problem is here that there's no wheelchair access, and there could be a lot of mud. And if anybody has a wheelchair, a worker who has a wheelchair would not be able to work at this site, because like most farmers, we just only put in enough concrete to set that unit on there. And then you can tell where the rest of the wheelbarrow full of concrete left over went. It's kind of a step up to the work area. So there's a lot of grass around here, and on a work day, it might not be that nice and green. It might be all mud. So I would suggest that if you have a track chair or a wheelchair, you need to have enough concrete around there to accommodate the chair of whichever version you have, and any other kinds of safety equipment. So you might even want to consider having their alley up to the chute in concrete, so that, and rough it and have very rough concrete here, because we want to have animals, we have a footing for the animals as well. So David, did you have any comments about this slide?
No, I don't, but why don't you go in and explain a little bit about what a bud box is as compared to a squeeze chute, or when we're using the different types of corrals, so people understand what a bud box is.
Okay. You can, if you look at different setups for chutes, we want to make the animal most comfortable, and we're trying to use their natural behaviors as a way to get them to always move forward. And when you start crowding animals into a capture pen, they're going to be confused as to where to go until there is a direction that leads them to go. And so a bud box is basically a pen that uses their natural behavior to go around something, to explore it, and have a good vision of how things are going to work, because they're always trying to escape, but they always want to be with their herd mates. So we're trying to act upon that behavior. And the bud box is basically can be a square or a round pen, either way, but you're going to try and eliminate lots of corners by adding sweep areas, so that the animal just naturally follows their herd mates into the chute and into the alleyway. And a lot of times we're seeing more round areas where animals can go in a circle. Basically, they can see their friends up in front and they want to follow them. So they're going to go more in a round motion to get into that alleyway. And the alley just directs them right into the turning. You have a turning door that kind of sweeps behind them. It's a sweep door, and it will push them towards the alley. Hopefully that explains it. We didn't include any pictures of that because we weren't as worried about animals as we were about people having secondary injuries. But when you use a bud box or a round pen to capture them and sweep them towards the alley to get into the chute, they just have a natural behavior of following the animal in front of them. And they just do so much better, and you don't have to push and prod them to get into the alleyway. And these are David's slides.
Okay, so we're going to transition into talking about some poultry equipment. And one of the first things is, when we transport poultry, is having the appropriate equipment to transport them. And these lightweight plastic stackable crates are much easier to deal with because they stack nice. They are easy to clean. And I've seen so many people wanting to use just a put together wire crate or even a dog carrier or things such as this. But this is, they're ventilated, they're easy to clean. The other thing is we always worry about predators when we're dealing with poultry, especially with chickens. And you can actually train your laying hens to go in and out of the buildings at night with this door opener because there's a bell that rings that alerts them that the door's going to be closing, and they figure out real fast to run into the house. Electric poultry netting is another way that you can do your pasture-based poultry. It also will reduce the predators because electric fence will repel them from trying to get into the chickens. One thing that you do have to worry about is predatory birds when you're going outside and you don't have a cover over them, though. The two main things that we always run into with poultry is feeding and water. And to me, water is always a more difficult item to deal with. The red tub is what we water our laying hens in. It's an open one. It's just hook up to a hydrant. And if I want to wash it out, I just pick it up, slosh it around a little bit, dump it, and it fills right back up. For our broiler chickens, we use the hanging water because it can water up to about 150 chickens per water. And so it's got a float in it. We hook that also up to a water hydrant, and we're not having to carry buckets of water and filling waters. So taking that stress off of carrying 5-gallon buckets or having actual chickens run out of water, which is, we raise most of our birds in the summertime, and when it gets hot, they really need an ample amount of water. When we talk about working with hogs, a rattle paddle is a very good item to use. We do not want to be using hot shots with livestock because it's just not an appropriate way to be getting livestock to move. The other thing you can do is take a sorting stick and tie like a plastic bag on the end of it. And that noise and that rattle will startle an animal enough to get them to moving in a right direction. When we're working with hogs, we need some way to actually sort them or guide them if we're loading them or sorting or whatever, and a panel, whether it's a plastic panel such as this one that's in the picture, or if we just build a wooden one. And a lot of times taking two of them and hinging them together works really well when we're moving livestock. When we're dealing with electric fences, there are some items that we really need to have. The fault finder actually gives us a direction where the fault is, so we can find where it's touching a post or it's off or down, that it's shorting out. And then the voltmeter helps us to establish if we've got enough current running through our fence. We run fencers that are pretty hot, and so we want our fences running around 7 to 8 joules. And so when they drop below that, these are psychological barriers. When we do electric fencing, they're not like you would put up a barbed wire fence. The animal is trained to not go to that fence. And we found, especially with our hogs, if the fence has been off for 2 or 3 days, they continually test it. And we know exactly when the hogs get out that the fence is off, because they have this ability to kind of take their ear and go up to a fence and see if it's clicking or not. And once they figure out that it's not, it's open range time again. So these are a couple of items that are really important if you're doing electric fencing.
Okay, and tool or rule. So what are we talking about here? And thank you, David, for those slides, because those will all save you a lot of steps if you have equipment that works well and is it's going to save you steps and time, because it is you're not carrying buckets, you're not hauling water anywhere. If you have the fences up to par, then you're not chasing livestock all over the place. And these things all save a lot of time and money and energy. And we're, if you have limited mobility, then we want to make sure that we save some energy for the rest of the day. But we're trying to remove barriers to working by using things like electronetting and a fence tester to see if it's on and see if everything's working. That way you don't use extra energy to find the problem. You know where it's at because you have a tester to test it. Now we come down to a tool or a rule. and anybody that has sheep and goats knows that we handle them a lot more than we do cattle and poultry and hogs. And with sheep, there's things that you have to do, especially goats. They take, they're pretty, they're problematic on with parasites. And so we found that a lot of people got in bad habits of using dewormers at the wrong time and just continually use them because they couldn't seem to get rid of the worms for their goats. So now we're trying to use management because none of these dewormers work. So that is a tool that we have to use and not a rule of using lots of medication to try and get them dewormed. So now what we try and do is get our producers to use management as a tool. And if you have one or two that need deworming, fine, deworm them and possibly cull them so that they're not continually contaminating the rest of your herd or flock. And so it's really important to know and keep track of what your animals are doing and have tags in their ears so that you can tell one from the other, because if you run a purebred line, they all look alike. And it's hard to know what animals you're treating if you don't mark them in some way. Also, the other things you can use as a tool are selecting a breed that is suited for your environment and your work. So if you're worried about animals having horns and being caught in fences, perhaps you should select a breed like the upper breed that is a pulled version of sheep, and they will never have horns, so you won't have to worry about that. Sorry, excuse me. Also, if you have a wooled version, wool sheep, but yeah, wool is devalued, maybe you want to select a hair sheep because they will shed off their wool, and excuse me, you won't have any problems with waiting for the shearer to come. Go ahead, Sean. Here again, we're talking about management, and this saves you a lot of time. If you learn how to do a fecal egg count and FOMACHA for your sheep and goats, then you can also use better grazing practices. And that way you are using your dewormers as a tool, not a rule. So a fecal egg count is a way to run a stool sample, and then when you use the McMaster slide, as shown here in this slide will hold the salt solution that you use to mix up with your fecal matter, and then you can read it on the grid under the microscope and take a count of how many different eggs you see on the slide. And then you can tell month to month if your animals need to be dewormed. So that way you're not overdoing it. Also, we want to use other management techniques. If you think about it, grain-fed animals are added man behavior. Whereas if we use grass-fed infrastructure, which there's not a lot of infrastructure for grass-fed animals, we're lowering our behavior as humans and letting the animals do all the work. So that's what I'm all about, is trying to lower the amount of activity I have to use to get my animals to get them to market to where I need them to be. Then, of course, we need to talk a little bit about records. There's a lot of problems with bad things happening in the marketplace where farmers and ranchers have maybe not mark their animals properly, and those animals get into the food stream, into the food chain. And so we have contaminated with meat with antibiotics, which is it's pretty rare nowadays because there are so many checks and balances. But you don't want to be the one person that lets an animal go through that has antibiotic residue or any kind of residue. Even from vaccines, there's withdrawal dates. So we want to practice read the label, mark our animals in some way, tag them somehow. And Kendra's going to come up later and talk to us about tagging. And also she's going to give us some tips and techniques to have really good long lasting tags. But we want to tag all of our animals if we can. Even poultry, there's ways to mark poultry. They have leg bands and wing clips and things like that that you can use. So if you don't write it down, you know, it didn't happen. And so it can cause you a lot of problem if your animal that's been treated for a medical condition, if they have not gone past the withdrawal date on that medication or vaccine, then it gets into the food chain. There's traceability back to you. And even if you don't tag your animal, many times and always they tag them at the sale barn if you sell them there, and they can trace them still back to you. So you've got to be careful nowadays. Don't be doing any off-label drugs and medications. Make sure you know which animals have been treated, mark them somehow. And Kendra will show us some tools for that too later. Use, you know, even if you can still use paper records, that's all right, as long as you keep them updated. But also think about, how do you know what your inventory is going to be for next year? So if you have tagged animals, you know what the birth rate was, what your, you know, how many animals you had born this year, and you know about when they're going to be at the right size and weight to sell on the market. So if you tag them, you have a record of when they're going to be at market and about how long it's going to take. So it's a good way to figure out budgets and inventories for next year and for the next season when you have weaned animals. So do we have any questions so far, Tawny?
I don't have any questions. Bev from Michigan did make a comment that hair sheep are simpler, but significant less market value. I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that as well.
I think there's ways to bring that market value up. I run hair sheep, and I can get $8.50 a pound at the farmer's market for any meat any lamb that I take. Plus I also sell into the horn market, so that's another stream of money. You know, hair sheep, and especially if you're grass fed, it does take about a year to finish one out. So that's a little more on the slow money side. But once you get started with them, they seem like they kind of build up. They do reproduce really well. And there's lots of ways to monetize that. So I don't want to get into defending hair over wool, but they can still do pretty well. They usually are a little smaller than your heavy wool breeds, but I think that one of the niches that I have found is that a whole lamb will fit in a refrigerator freezer. And so that is a selling point for me. And also I try to know who my customer is, and that I know that my customer wants convenience. So I try, if I prepare the meat and have it inspected so I can sell it at the farmer's market, it's always going to be convenience food. So ground meat and lamb chops, and I also do some brats. So that's but we're kind of off topic here because we're talking about how we can prevent injuries and help people with limited mobility and make sure that we remove those barriers for folks as they're working with livestock. But if my phone number's on here, and if you need some more help with maybe working with your hair sheep and you feel like that is you're not getting enough money out of them, call me. I'll help you with a few things. Maybe we can figure something out for you.
That's great. Thank you for that explanation. Okay.
So now we're going to move on into Kendra's talk.
Hello, everybody. I appreciate being allowed to talk with everybody this evening. It's very great opportunity to spread the information that we have available. I'm not sure exactly who our audience is here, if they're actual producers or if we're talking with some educators. So hopefully you guys can use these tools as either an educational source or just as a learning opportunity for anyone listening here. Okay, next slide. We're talking about livestock tools, and I work with Karen Funkenbush on this, and we went together and purchased several tools from local either farm supply stores or farm supply centers online. And so want to let you guys know that all of these should be available to any producer, and focusing more on cow-calf producers here, a little bit of hog information. We worked with the AgrAbility program on this and a couple of grants. We also had a beginning farmer grant that we partnered with. And so we're not only hitting the beginning farmers, but we're also doing those to make work easier for some of those people that struggle. Again, these tools are very easy to handle. We went to the farm supply stores. We don't intend to promote any type of company or product with this. We wanted to make it very real. And so hopefully the products that you see you use on your farm, if you have any products that maybe we didn't list or mention that are great for you, you can put those in the chat and we can talk about those. However, there's so many products out there, we're never going to be able to find all of those. These are just some of those ones that we have in our toolboxes at home and we use on a regular basis. So next slide.
Kendra,
So starting,
if you don't mind real quick, I'll just address who the audience is.
okay.
It's AgrAbility staff and cow-calf producers, feeder cattle producer. So extension personnel. So you have quite the variety.
Okay, so we're probably going to focus more on how to handle these tools. Some of you may know already, but maybe this will be valuable for those educators to talk to your producers utilizing these products that we have available here. So we're going to start off with Partridge Aids in mainly cattle, and we may use these in some of our small animals also. One of these things in your toolbox that it is a must have, because you're going to come up with those situations where you're going to have to assist your animals if you are either a cow-calf operation or either calving or lambing or kidding out some of those females. These need to be in your toolbox. A veterinarian is not always available, and it seems like they're getting harder and harder to find to come out to the farms. So I recommend at least having one chain. 2 is better. The long one, sometimes they get in the way, but the long ones are very handy. And having that handle gives you that opportunity to be able to put a little more pressure if you're trying to pull these calves out, that maybe they're a little large or just in a little odd position. And I want to note the Mississippi State picture there on the slide. This is how you put those chains on the calf leg or the animal leg. We want a double hitch on there to avoid putting too much pressure in one spot on the calf's leg and causing injury. Okay, next slide. If you're working with swine, you may have some of the, or even lambs, you may have some of these snares that you'll have in your toolbox. Those are necessary. Just sometimes just those animals get tired of pushing and they just need a little help. And those insides are very slick. And so we need a little bit of help grabbing on and holding on to those. Lube is also very, very important. This product is actually a powder that you mix with water. I found that some of the lubes, I don't always use them all up, and they sit around a little bit and they get a little watery on me. So if I can have a powder that I mix up whenever I need it, it's kind of nice to have and have a fresh product. Next slide. Obstetric gloves are necessary to not only protect you from whatever you're touching, but also protect the animal to prevent bacteria infection or any debris inside the animal too. You're reaching in there and trying to help them. So we want to make sure we're as clean and sterile as possible. The shoulder length gloves are probably pretty necessary for pulling calves and things like that. You're probably not going to go shoulder length in a sheep or a goat. So those small, just nitrile gloves will help in those situations. These gloves are also used if you're artificial breeding cattle, reaching in there and breeding those animals. You'll need those type of gloves. Now they make blue, they make pink, they make purple, all different kinds. Find one that you like or whatever is most available for you. You can see that there's also a package of white ones or clear ones there. Some of them say they are high touch, give you a little more sensitivity. And so, trying to find those that are suitable for you. You don't have to have a specific color for a specific situation. Next. Now, if you do either calve out or lamb out, kid out, or whatever, you may have a situation where you have to feed an animal, a baby, something, whether it for a short period of time, long period of time, or whatnot. And so these bottles and fluid feeders are pretty necessary to have around. Hopefully you don't have to use them very often. So you may have to purchase some of those nipples more often because they do dry rot on you a little bit. But as you can see on the bottles, they make several different kinds. And my mother's a little bit older and she really appreciates those peach teat calf bottles with the handle. Little Giant, I think, makes one with a handle also. It really helps with their hands and holding those bottles. Sometimes those calves are a little eager and like to push that bottle out of your hands or pull it. And that handle gives you a little bit more leverage. They also make a calf bottle holder that you can slip on the side of the fence and slip that bottle in there so you're not holding that bottle the whole time. And then the fluid feeders are used for tube feeding calves. This one's a little larger for calves. They make a smaller one for small animals and need to get something down it. Sometimes time is of a great importance. And so going ahead and getting some nutrition down into that calf, putting that tube down into the stomach to get that fluid in there. Sometimes it's very hard to pass that fluid and making sure you have it in the stomach instead of the lungs. And so be very sure when you're putting that tube down there that you're not sticking it in the lungs. Okay, next slide. As Susan had pointed out, we're talking about ear tags, and there's several available, so many on the market that sometimes it's hard to choose. We have pretty well all, there's an all flex tagger there on there, and then those Z tags are fairly popular. Y tags are also very popular. I think your choice is whether you want a 1-piece or a 2-piece, and so that's something to think about. Do you want to deal with that second little button, dropping that? You have to have that in order to tag. You're dealing with maybe tagging calves out in the field once they're born, and it can be a little struggle to get both pieces directly in line up and so forth. So maybe you want the Z tag, but you need to go with what's easiest for you. Most of those taggers are fairly easy to use, and most of them have a quick release type. You can see the YTEX tagger and also the Z tagger both have the pins that flip up. And so you insert that tag in, you clamp down, and you can kind of pull away, and that tag releases without having to let up pressure on the tagger. So most of these are very lightweight taggers. That Temple tagger can be a little heavy, but as you can see, it's discontinued. I just wanted to put it up there as a reference. Make sure the tagger that you buy the correct tags to go with it, and that you know how to put them on. Sometimes the Z tagger can be a bit of a challenge, and so we'll talk about that in just a minute. Also, always make sure you have some sort of ink or marker if you have blank tags. You may also need that marker if those tags fade and you need to put in without changing the tag, try to write on that tag. And then a tag remover. Don't use your pocket knife, please. I think it's a high risk. You're going to cut your finger. So those tag removers make it very easy to cut a tag out of an animal's ear. Next slide.
Kendra, we had a question about tags. Someone wanted to know if there's a tagger that could be used one-handed throughout the entire tagging process. And also, is there easier to clamp down with less pressure? So that would be probably somebody that has some joint issues or arthritis.
Correct. So if that All Flex tagger and even this YTEX tagger can be fairly easy to use. Most of those are fairly light because they're a two-piece. It's just you're just locking that the back of that tag or second piece into the front of the tag through the ear. So that may be a little bit easier than the Z tag. You have to force that tag all the way through the ear and even a little bit further for that back of that tag to flip up and catch in there. I really recommend going and trying these out in the store if you can. That way you're going to know if it fits your hand. This YTEX tagger is a little bit big for my hands. I have pretty small hands. The Z tagger and the All Flex tagger were a little smaller. So my preference is those two. And the Z tagger is very lightweight. It's plastic compared to the YTEX or the All Flex tagger. It does have some metal in it. So that may help reduce fatigue a little bit. However, I do want to point out that Z tagger, putting on those tags that you can see how those tags actually have to be bent up and slid onto there. That can wear your hand out if you're doing several at a time. So there's pros and cons to all of them. I recommend going and trying them out if you can, or attending a program that maybe you're able to use those and kind of see how they function. Down in the bottom left of your screen on these Z tags, I want to point this out because I have made the mistake for a very long time putting these in the wrong way. If you notice the light green tag, these are feedlot tags. They're a lighter weight tag, a lot less expensive, and they are put in a different way. If you see that pin is slid in the very back of the tag versus trying to bend that tag up and put it through the pin through the tag itself. So just know I made that mistake. I wanted to pass on the little education that those feedlot tags are put on there a little different. I've ruined many a tag trying to put the feedlot tags on a different way. Okay, next slide. Tag ink. It seems like we always fight with trying to keep tags from fading or the number wearing off. So it's best to use the tag marker that really goes with the tag. They're designed together. They have the Z tag marker. I think All Flex makes a marker. YTEX has this marking ink. And so a little trick with some of these, if you're making your own tags and writing on them, write it down on the tag using whatever ink or marker you're using, and then mark microwave them for a little bit. That kind of gets the ink to soak in. Don't do it too long because you'll really smoke up the house or curl the tags or whatnot. But just 5 to 10 seconds, getting that to soak in, and then put another coat on it after that. That seems to make them last just a little bit longer. So there's something to think about to make your ink soak into that tag. Ear tags remover, again, is a very necessary tool, I think, in any operation. Next slide. Other identification aids, since we're on that track, a livestock marking stick, a paint stick, if you will, are great tools to temporarily mark for a short period of time. Maybe you're sorting animals out and want to sell some, so you put a mark on there, and they're a little easier to see or identify and move along versus making them turn and face you and look at their ear tag. And then the tooth nippers and ear notchers. Some people like more of a permanent form of identification. So for swine or even cattle, they'll use these ear notchers to put a notch in the ear so they know maybe they're from a certain herd is 1 notch and 2 notches is from another herd or another location. For swine, of course, we always have our ear notch identification where we put litter number and pig number in one ear or the other. And another thing you can use the ear notchers for is to notch the ear tag even, just to add another layer of identification that's different from just the number.
Also, Kendra, you can use those to notch the ear tag if you're going to cull animals. You know, if they've already made the list, then it's real quick to identify them if they're going to be pulled out of the flock or the herd, that you know that animal's going because they have had another issue in the flock. And so it's real easy to get them sorted off when you're running through animals real quick to sort.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. Okay, next slide. Castrating, and I have calf band, but definitely you can use these for your small animals also. And we had a conversation, Susan and I had a conversation earlier. We have a cattle operation. I like the larger metal ones you see there simply because they're easier to squeeze. And sometimes our calves can be a little large down there, and it's easier to get the scrotum down in through there. However, Susan did say she appreciated the blue ones because they're smaller, easier to get in places. And I just find them a little bit harder to squeeze. Again, wearing my hands out a bit. And then if your castration bands, they make several different types of castration tools. I put the cheapest ones up here. They do have a Castrate bander, and those bands that come with that are $2 a piece. I can band a lot more calves with these castration bands here, a pack of 100 for the same price as one of the others. You just need to make sure you band those calves earlier in their life if you're doing the castrating process via banding. So doing that at 2 to 3 months of age versus trying to do that maybe at weaning, where you do need those larger bands. Okay, next slide. Syringes and vaccinators. I have went through several on my farm, and there's several products out there. Again, these are the ones that we use or that we had available when we went to the store. Allflex has a draw off syringe that you see right there. That's my hand. You can see my hands are pretty small. I really, really like this syringe. My hands don't wear out very often. You attach this to the bottle of vaccine, and you just use it until the bottle's empty. So there is a bit of a drawback with that. You probably need to use that with larger bottles. The smaller bottles empty too quickly, and you tend to get some air in there, and it takes a little bit to get that air out of the tube. So if you do have smaller doses or medicine that you need to mix, like our modified live vaccines, then you may switch to an All-Flex, the pistol grip repeater syringe. So you can fill that up. You probably have to fill it up more frequently, but if you're mixing medicines, usually those come in 10-dose bottles anyways. Primatech also makes a really great autofill vaccinator. It's again another small vaccinator, and very easy to use for smaller hands, and your hands don't wear out nearly as fast as if you would use those pistol grip syringes. I do want to point out, keep your syringes in working order. When you finish with them, clean them out using hot water only. Don't use soap. You're putting vaccines through here, and soap will make those vaccines inactive. And so we want to make sure and not have anything residue in that syringe to make it inactive. So just clean those with hot water. Clean them out after every use, every time you use them, and let them dry. Pull them apart. Take that tube off of the syringe and let them dry. Don't put any oils or anything that may contaminate the inside of that, and replace those little rubber pieces in there, because they can tend to dry rot fairly quickly. Okay, next slide.
Kendra, if I could please just, I want to remind everyone to please fill out the evaluation, and the link is in chat. We're approaching about 5 till, and just to give you a heads up on timing.
Okay. This type of vaccinator called a slap shot is very easy to use, mainly for swine. We tend to not have working facilities for swine necessarily, and so this makes it very easy to treat those animals. And so you're attaching that tube to your syringe. As you can see in the picture, they're using a repeater syringe, and so running that, slapping that onto the pig, giving it a shot, and it pops right back out. Very easy to use, and then it leaves your second hand kind of free to mark that animal that you just gave a shot to. Okay, next. Some hoof and leg care. If you have small animals, and it even works very well for large animals too. Sometimes our cows need a good hoof trim. Producer's Pride hoof trimmers are very easy to use, very inexpensive as compared to some others. Tend to last a long time, very sharp. And then you always want to have some sort of bandages available if you're going to need that. Sometimes animals just tend to sometimes search out for accidents, and you want to have something available to be able to treat them. Again, we can't always have the vet at our beck and call, and so sometimes you are the vet. And so having these in your toolbox is a good plan of action. Next. I think David talked about some of these sorting tools. This is mainly for swine, a sorting panel, just blocking the line of vision, and having your swine see that there's not a way out. So this is a visual deterrent. It's not, you can use it as a physical deterrent, but let's be real, most of our animals, if they want to go somewhere, they're going to. And so just you knowing how to manage your animals and providing those deterrents can help you in your working facilities. Next. And David had talked about some of these. I don't have a rattle paddle here on these pictures, but I do have a few other things. The catch hook is a very nice tool for your small animals to catch those from a little bit of a distance, and then even your calves. We at our farm tend to tag our calves at birth, and sometimes those calves can get up really fast and run. And so we can kind of drive up next to them, and even though they're walking or trotting a little bit, we can reach out and grab that back leg and slow them down so we can get a hold of them and put a tag in their ear. Sorting poles and whips are a very good tool to have around. You don't always need to be next to your livestock. Sometimes you just want to have a little bit of extra length to stay away from that place that they can kick you. And so having a sorting pole to encourage them to move forward or out of the way is a good thing to have. The flag whips are also more of a visual type thing. They do make a little noise. Sometimes we can get a little over eager and swing that around a little too much. And so pay attention to the reaction your animals have, and don't overuse these tools to move your animals around. Next slide. And so for some of our horse producers, we have this nylon halter is always a good thing to have, and even our cattle, sometimes we need a rope halter or whatever to restrain our animals. And then your lunge whip is also a good tool to have. Okay, next. And David, do you want to talk a little bit about some of these tools? These are just our last few slides.
Yeah, there's always a need in our toolbox for some extra tools. And for me, a hammer, pliers, and a knife are always something I have in my side-by-side or my pickup with me all the time, because we're either fixing a fence or cutting a wire or opening bags or whatever. But those tools are always, we have multiple sets of them on our farm everywhere we're at. So we're not running somewhere to look for a tool. We know it's either in the side-by-side or it's in the truck or it's in the cab tractor or wherever that we're at. Okay, Sean. We tend to, as farmers, have one pair of gloves that we think's for everything. And I want you to think about your shoes. We have work shoes, we have dress shoes, we have running shoes, we have different shoes for everything that we do. And we don't do that with our gloves. And so, yeah, we need gloves for sometimes to keep our hands warm, but we also need to use gloves for protection of our palms or our knuckles. Maybe we need a glove that's a gripper. Maybe we need a glove that is anti-vibration for the job that we're doing. So multiple types of gloves for multiple use saves our hands. And, you know, to me, hands, knees, and elbows seem to what wear out fastest for farmers. And so when we protect those areas of our body, it's going to keep us productive longer. And so just remember that there are any store you can find more than just the old yellow cotton gloves or even leather gloves that will have some backing on the knuckles or some grips in the palms that will help out with what we're doing to keep our hands in a better shape. We can add little things that on wheels to a gate that we're not have to pick that gate up and carry it. A lot of times makes it easier on our back and our legs, but we're taking that stress off of our body of walking, carrying something. And when you look at tools, try different ones. When you're shopping, pick up different manufacturers, different sizes, find what works best for you. And just like I said, we keep multiple sets in different vehicles so that we know we're not searching for something all the time. And colors are very important on your handles. A lot of the tools that we find either have blue or green handles, and I can't find those things in the grass when they fall out of my pocket or I lay them down somewhere. So orange, red, hot pink are actually great colors to find. It stands out to us when we're outside working. And make sure that you're constantly taking care of your equipment by keeping it clean, keeping it lubricated, and repairing any broken parts on it, because that's where secondary injuries come in to us when we try to work with equipment that's not in perfect working condition. So once again, look at the ergonomic tools. They may be a little more pricey, but your health is worth it. And there are so many new items out there in the market to help us work better and smarter and not harder. So we thank you for being at our presentation today. Once again, I want to remind you to fill out the evaluation in the chat. And from all of us at Lincoln University and University of Missouri, we thank you for your time and being with us today.
Thank you all very much. I know I took a lot of notes. Your presentation was packed full of great information, and we'll finish up with this slide, and we'll see if there's some other questions that linger in here. So for everyone that joined us today, thank you very much for taking the time, and be sure you follow the link in the chat box to answer the evaluation questions about today's session. A recording of this session, along with the slides, will be archived on the National AgrAbility website at www.agrability.org/online-training/2021 NTW-virtual. And you can use the same Zoom link that you used today for all of our upcoming Tuesday sessions. Next week's session is Table Talk, Assistive Tech for Women in Ag, with Abby Spackman and Linda Fetzer, and it'll be at 1 o'clock Eastern time zone again. And if you have any questions, you can contact Tess at tmckel@goodwillfingerlakes.org. I'm gonna check and see if we have any more questions. If anybody has anything you would like to ask. This would be the time. I don't see any other questions right now. David, I was going to ask you if you ever spray paint your tools.
Yes, we do. Once the handles fall off of them, we paint them red.
Great idea.
Because those plastic handles wear out after a while. Yeah, that's, I hate looking for tools in the grass. And that's where they end up.
Yes, you can use your time much more wisely, I'm sure. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just saw your.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Bobby Milliken. I work for the state VR in Indiana, and I'm currently working on a farm mod for a person who has a small number of cattle. I'm not going to use the right language because I'm not a farmer. But she's got animals that are cattle, mostly females, one bull, and it's been recommended that she get a calf catcher. And I was just wondering, you guys didn't talk at all about calf catchers. And I have looked them up and looked at them on YouTube, because otherwise I would have had no idea what a calf catcher was. And I'm just sort of wondering if you have any comments about them. That's my question.
Yes. Tell me about the farmer's disability. Is it mobility or is it vision?
It's mobility. She probably needs knee replacements, but she's just sort of getting along without knee replacements right now. But like, she uses a walker when she's out and about. You know, in her home, she doesn't use a walker where it's all flat and steady. But when she's out on the farm, she uses a walker, and she has a utility vehicle that she gets around with.
Okay, so a utility vehicle instead of a four-wheeler.
She's got a Prowler, a Pro Prowler, or Prowler Pro.
Okay, I'm very hesitant to recommend those because in my region, we've got ditches and trees and rocks. And if she's got a nice flat area which she can run her equipment in, would be one thing. I worry about secondary injuries. I've actually had a farmer get really upset with me because I wouldn't recommend one, and he wanted one, but he had low vision and he was on hills and rocks and trees and ditches. And I knew he'd probably kill himself because farmers get a little aggravated and try to run over stuff after a while. But in Indiana, it's fairly flat and you don't have a lot of trees and rocks to deal with, it may be something that would work for her.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. We also had someone else add that a calf catcher only if the land is flat.
Yeah.
I guess we could use those here in Kansas.
Yeah, most of Indiana is pretty flat, but it isn't all flat. So I will have to, we'll just talk a little bit about that too. So thank you. I appreciate your comments. I was just wondering.
Yeah, if she's in an area, you know, if she's calving in a pasture that is not too large and very few obstacles in it, that may work. If you're talking about an 80-acre field and having to run all over it and there's obstacles, I would be very hesitant to use it.
Okay, I looked at it on YouTube and I thought, man, I don't know that I could use one of those, but I'm not a farmer. So, you know, it looks like it could be tricky to do. You got to coordinate a lot of things and you don't want to be running into anything and injuring anything yourself or otherwise. So, all right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a very good question. Anyone else out there that would like, you can unmute and ask a question or post it in the chat box.
And you might want to go back a couple of slides. If you want to contact us to find phone numbers and emails. We'll be glad to answer questions that way too.
I guess if no one else is asking a question and we can stay on a little bit, I have another client that had a major traumatic brain injury as a result of probably he didn't have the right equipment to do the work that he was doing. He had a big farm with had a lot of animals on it, cattle, and he ended up getting a head injury, and VR is actually helping him to get a system that includes the chute and I'm not going to use the right language, but the chutes that they have to walk down, and then the turret system. And I guess I'm wondering if part of what AgrAbility might be doing, I mean, I'm working with the Indiana AgrAbility on that case, but it seems like farmers, is that like a lack of knowledge about what could happen if you don't have all the right equipment that you should have? I mean, he probably should have had all this equipment and then he may not have sustained this traumatic brain injury. Is that a fair statement? Is that something that people need to know more about?
Sometimes it boils down to having the funds to do something right. And you as a farmer will do what you can to get by until you can afford better. And that's probably what happened with this situation. Was he didn't have the correct equipment and he jerry-rigged something together to try to get through and probably got hurt because it wasn't as secure or as proper as what it should have been.
Yeah.
With the way things are in agriculture, finances are tough. And
Yeah.
so sometimes you keep using something that's wore out, or you repair it to a point that we'll get by for one more time. And that's when problems seem to happen.
Yeah, we are justifying and purchasing a system for him. He and his wife, he gets a lot of support from his wife now too, and they're putting in a lot of the concrete and a lot of the, I don't know how to phrase it exactly, but some of the extra stuff that he needs, but we're paying a good sum for a turret system and I guess a squeeze chute, but it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
Well, probably what you're doing for him is going to help him do all that work a lot easier. A lot of the modern chutes have hydraulic systems on them and air pressure systems, so that you just barely touch a button and the equipment puts the animal in a stationary state so that they can't walk around or move at all, because the equipment actually does all the work for you. And then they can, because the animal is so still, it's standing so still that now you can do everything you need to do very quickly. And then they're not under stress because they're being held still. And then as soon as you're done with all the vaccinations, doing anything with their feet, or they're tagging them or any of that, then it happens very fast because you have a team of people working at the chute to do it all. And here again, because you have a nice system in place, they push one button, the animal is released, and then you push another button to let them out. And they have a lot less stress that way. And then they could just walk right out the front of the chute. You know, sometimes they're a little fast going out, but it clears all the equipment away, and there's no people in the way because now you've done it in the proper order.
Yeah.
So that will make a difference. He probably won't get any secondary injuries because he has the right equipment now.
That's what we're hoping.
I want to point something out too. For those type of operations, you really need to match the type of animal to what you have available. If you have an animal that is a little unruly, they don't need to hesitate at all to get rid of that animal. You don't need to have those around, and have calm animals and watch that animal behavior closely.
I think that is a mistake that a lot of us make. We keep animals too long, and we tend to think about, well, I need more numbers to get, so I have a higher inventory of product going out next year. Well, if you're going to get hurt because the animal is crazy and wild, then it won't matter how many animals you have. And culling, you'd be surprised how fast selecting for the good traits and getting rid of the bad traits, culling those out, in like with small ruminants, in 3 to 5 years, you'll have an amazing flock or herd because you have you've sold those animals that have those problems that make you work harder. And so, and even with cattle, in 5 to 10 years, you will have an amazing herd because you're always selecting for the good things and culling out the bad things. And so I think probably, I don't know about you, Kendra, but I know David and I work on the 3 strikes and you're out. And we have goals that we set for our animals so that we are always working toward that higher standard of livestock. What do you think, Kendra?
Absolutely. A hospital bill is so much more expensive than whatever that animal could ever produce for you. So if you're hesitant at all, if you're uncomfortable with an animal, it probably needs to go to town, and younger is better than older. Don't keep it around thinking it's going to calm down, because most of the time, once those animals start out that way, they don't get better, they get worse.
Yeah.
And it does make your rest
offspring like that.
Absolutely. It makes the rest of your group act that way.
They start following.
Even removing one animal makes such a huge difference on a set of animals you're raising.
Yeah, genetics plays into all of that. And the longer you keep that animal around, the more copies of that animal you have. So those need to go to town if they're causing problems. I set goals. They can't hurt me, my equipment, or other animals. I don't keep them past 5 years of age, but I'm talking about small ruminants, because there's other problems they could have at that point. Also, if they're always wormy, or if they have bad feet problems, they got to go. I don't like to work that hard. I want to enjoy my animals. I want to see them out grazing on grass and doing well.
Oh, thank you for those explanations. We do have one other question regarding side-by-sides. And is there a preferred recommendation? She said, we have gators and getting in and out with that bar on the seat is difficult.
There's different versions of that same gator. You have to have a newer version, I think. And that bar is still there, but it's a lot lower. But there's other versions that don't have that, but you really have to kind of look around. David probably has the most knowledge on those units. You still with us, David? There he is.
I'm usually either recommending the Kubotas or the Gators because they're agricultural equipment and not toys. And you can check out some of the Polarises. And Teresa, the best thing to do is probably just visit some dealers and see what you can get in and out of easier than us trying to recommend something to you without you actually going to a dealership and seeing what you can do to get into them.
That sounds good. Thank you very much, David. We've got a newer Gator. I mean, it's an 825 XI or something. It's about 3 years old. And just that, even though it's a lower bar, just getting my rear and hip over that thing is difficult sometimes. And I don't know, I mean, right now finances are in the cattle business, things a little tight, but I was just thinking for future reference, if there was any particular thing, and I'll definitely start looking at that. Thanks.
Have you thought about maybe building a platform that's next to the Gator that you could step up on that's like 6 inches or so, 4 inches, that would get you higher to step into the Gator?
No, I hadn't really thought about that because I'm getting on and off like in the field.
Okay.
I was cutting cedars and fence line a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of using the Gator up close enough to the fence to brace against it, but it got pretty fatiguing getting in and out of it over time. So, but that is an idea, if I was close by.
Yeah, I'm just thinking there by your house or even out in your barns.
Right.
You just had a platform that you could pull up to that would,
Right.
another
Yeah.
4 inches, that would raise you up that much easier to get into the seat.
Yeah, that is the exact reason that I demanded that there's steps on every 4-wheel drive vehicle that we have, and that's all that we have right now. But there is a roll bar step on everything to get in and out.
Another thing that might help you transfer a little better, if you could find a cushion that is thin enough but has a vinyl coating on it,
Yeah,
and it's just enough to sit over that bar,
yeah,
then you could slide a little easier when you transfer in.
that's a good idea. Yeah,
And what comes to mind first is kindergarten mat.
yeah,
I don't even know if you can find those anymore, but that would be all vinyl, and you can fold it as high as you need it.
right.
And then like just cut off what you don't need and just tape it over. But
That's
that's a quick fix. Something to actually just pad that bar a little more.
Yeah,
I've seen something similar to like a extra step by tractor where then the farmer could pull it up with a string or a rope.
right.
Perhaps there's something that you could fashion so that you have a rope on it. You take it with you out in the field, and then you just, pop it back up and throw it in the back and go on. And then next stop, you can take it out and do it again.
Okay. Good ideas. Thanks, guys.
Anybody else have some good ideas for the stepping in and out?
We are way past our time, so I think
Okay.
maybe we want to be mindful of our presenters' times too. So if anybody has any other questions, I think they would be glad to answer them if you get in contact with them.
No problem. Glad to do it.
Thank you all very much. This was a wonderful presentation. With 28 people still on 25 minutes after the deadline, I think you can see how important it was and how interesting it was to everyone.
Thank you. Hope to see everyone next week.
Thanks.
Thank you all.